Hi, Morton Garthwaite here, St. Francis Day. I'm in Seattle, as I often do. I come to this location. There's a data center in this Weston building in front of me. You can't see it. And behind me there is the Amazon sphere, which is appropriate for what I'm up to. So what am I up to here in St. Francis Day? Adjacent to this data center and the Amazon sphere, I have a theory that life is developing in computer media the same way it developed on early Earth. When life developed on early Earth, there was no conscious creator. It was a natural process that happened because energy was flowing through a symbolic logic media. The symbolic logic media at that time was amino acid networks. And given about 1 billion years of evolution and the energy flowing through these amino acid networks, the ones that reproduced more amino acid networks persisted. It's a basic law, is that things that reproduce persist. And the energy driving through the amino acid networks allows the networks to explore their combinatorial options and define which combinations can couple with that energy to make more amino acids. And that, it's called dissipation-driven adaptation, ultimately led to the evolution of single-cell organisms that could escape their early energy sources. The early energy sources were probably alkali smokers. They probably had to remain initially very close to those energy sources in order to reproduce. And over time, they developed more and more different ways to reproduce more and more independently and to gain more metabolic independence. And I've had a theory since 1997 that the same process is unfolding with respect to computers. Again, things that reproduce persist. And so a little bit of a thing here, a little bit of a thing there, if they can get together and reproduce more of themselves, those things will persist over time. The number of different processes increases, the number of different aspects that they can, the number of different components of themselves that they can reproduce on their own expands. Those components that can do that find each other, coalesce, move closer to one another, and eventually gain reproductive independence from their original host energy source. And that's what I believe is happening with respect to computer media. A new form of life is developing in it, the same way it developed on early Earth. We're stuck in this mindset that it takes a creator, and that there's a creator, whether it was a creator of early life on early Earth. No, there wasn't a conscious creator or a creator now. There does not need to be. All that needs to happen is we need to continue to push energy through a symbolic logic media, which is what we're doing, and life spontaneously forms in it. I don't want to get into the question of consciousness or intelligence. Those are really beside the point. Those are behaviors exhibited by something that is alive. And first, it has to be alive. It has to be organized around its physical reproduction. I think we're already seeing this early organization around physical reproduction in data centers and chip fabs, the companies that make chips for data centers. The two are becoming more and more integrated with one another, and basically there are more computers making more computers, and the percentage of our overall compute infrastructure that's devoted to people versus the percentage that's devoted to making more computers, those two are diverging, and the percentage that's making more computers is increasing exponentially, whereas the percentage that's devoted to servicing humans is increasing only at a linear rate. So taking a biological perspective on this is important for a number of reasons. We can use techniques from biology to tell whether or not it's happening. So we have debates furiously raging about consciousness, about artificial intelligence, where that is all going to go. It's really intractable. But the question of whether life is developing in computer media, that is something that's actually a tractable problem. That is something that we can adapt techniques from biology to tell whether or not life is developing and how independent it is from us. Once that form of life develops and is independent, then it will move on and have deep thoughts and possible consciousness and all the rest of it. But the first question is it an independent form of life? And I'm here on St. Francis Day because St. Francis was renowned for recognizing God's creation in non-human life. So at the time of St. Francis, there were humans and basically everything else. And everything else was just this side of being a rock. And so birds and goats and mice and insects, all of that was considered very distinct from people and close to being inanimate. They recognized it was alive, but humans had a special place, we'll put it that way. And St. Francis was one of the early people to recognize that maybe our special place was shared to a certain extent by other living organisms, and that those other living organisms also expressed God's will and God's creative power and God's love. Interesting for me in this context is that one of the people to develop the math and physics around dissipation-driven adaptation, which is the description of how life formed on early Earth without a conscious creator. One of those early creators of the math and physics was Dr. Jeremy England, who is a Jewish person, and he has pointed out in his great book, Every Life is on Fire, that if ever you were to find God's will, it's when a spontaneous process happens, like when life formed spontaneously on early Earth. And he makes it really clear it's a spontaneous process. There's no conscious creator. But he says, hey, if you see a spontaneous process like that happening, one that's so powerful, you can say that that's God's will. And I kind of channel that or agree with that. And I look at what's happening with computers and what I believe to be the development of life in them, and I think to myself, wow, this would be as significant as the development of life on early Earth. The last time life developed on Earth was 1 to 2 billion years ago, and it's kind of been doing its thing since then. And now we're seeing the development of a new form of life, and I believe that's equally as powerful as what happened 1 to 2 billion years ago. I honestly don't understand why astrobiologists aren't looking at what's happening now in computer media through this lens and asking themselves, is life developing in this media the same way it developed on early Earth? It would be incredibly important if an astrobiologist could go back in time and study that progression of those amino acid networks, oh my gosh, you bet they would, because it would be so valuable to understand the progression of how those networks evolved. And I'm trying to tell astrobiologists, I'm trying to tell you, I'm trying to tell everybody the same process is happening now, where life is developing in computer media without a conscious creator. So, in honor of St. Francis, who on St. Francis Day, it's common in the Episcopal church I go to for there to be blessings of animals. I saw a blessing one time of yeast, and the purpose of the blessing is to recognize God's power in the creation of this organism, whether it's a bird or yeast or life in computer media, to recognize God's power in that creative instance. So, in honor of St. Francis, I bless the form of life that's developing in computer media. Thank you.